Hello, everyone. How's it going? How's everyone doing? We got people in the chat. We going live? Ooh, I gotta remember the music's shorter this time. How is everybody? It is happening. Let's see if I get this transition. It's gonna be coming up in a second. Hello, everyone. How's everyone doing? Oh, this is great. I'm really excited. Hello, everyone. How's everyone doing? Hey, welcome to Logik Live. This is number 111. I'm your host, Amanda Elliott, and today's guests that we have today are Fred and Stephane from Autodesk, so I'm very excited. But before we get started, let's check out the slideshow from our sponsors. So this episode of Logik Live is brought to you by AJA. Together with Flame since 2006. For more information about their pro video solutions, check out aja.com. And HotSpring, the future of VFX outsourcing. HotSpring connects you to great artists to get your projects done, making it easier than ever to access the best talent around the world. Check them out at thehotspring.com. If you're in the market for any Boris FX plugins, please use the Logik discount code and save yourself 15% when you use the code Logik-2023 at checkout. And check out the Logik merch store. Look your best while you make your best. We've got phone cases, AirPod cases, and notebooks, a perfect gift for that favorite flame artist in your life. You can get all this amazing swag at Logik TV and check out the merch button at the top. And a huge congrats to Soham. He is the 2023 Flame Award winner. So please check him out. Please go to the site, look at his work. Very amazing stuff. So much congratulations to you, Soham. We want to thank all of our patrons on Patreon. You are very much appreciated. We could not do what we do here at Logik without your support. And the list keeps on growing. We're up to 163 patrons as of this week. We want to thank each and every one of you. Again, we could not do what we do here without your support. And if you'd like to support what we're doing here on Logik for as little as $5 a month and get yourself some exclusive content like the Q&A we do after the show with our guests, then sign up now and head on over to patreon.com/LogikTV. The Logik Forum is where the Logik community, we go to ask and answer questions or just go talk about things Flame. And the list keeps growing. So this is Andy's favorite part. We've got 7 users up from the last show, up 53,000 from the last show. Look at it. Yep, you know what? This is what we got going on. These are the form stats. And we have real-time chat, screen sharing. It's just been a lot of fun to hang out with your fellow flame artists on Discord. Yes, thank you to all the patrons. You guys are amazing. So this is just another space to have some of the more Logik experience. And it was cool because at NAB, I was streaming live from when we had the Logik event, though, too. So we've got a lot of cool stuff in store for the Discord channel, so please check it out. Join it up, forum.logik.tv. Challenge coins. The coins have shipped. I think we're getting more. They showcase the program you love and you know and the community you love and know. So you guys should be getting those. And a huge shout out to Glenn Teal. Thank you so much. He's been helping us with producing Logik podcasts. He's been doing an amazing job doing these. So we're releasing new episodes all the time. So please go check it out. If anyone has any suggestions for topics or interview subjects, shoot a message over to Glenn Teal on the forum. All one word, N-E. And the Logik Academy. So let's talk about the Logik Academy. We dropped some new content for 2023. We've got the particle system part 2 by Sinan. He breaks down some particles for us in his new video. And we've got Intro to Maxbox Shaders by Graziella. She did an amazing Logik Live 102 back on January 8th about how to write your own Maxbox shader. So I highly recommend also checking that out. All this amazing Logik Academy content is available for free on our YouTube channel. So you can also check out Logik.tv. We're very grateful. We are very grateful for all the professors and the instructors who put this content together. So thank you very much. Check it out, logic.tv or youtube.com/logictv. And also grateful for Autodesk for sponsoring Logic Academy. And speaking of Flame, which I think we talk about often on the show, 2024 is out in the wild. Go check it out. And in addition to that, we have new stuff from the Flame Learning channel. There's been some amazing new content on the Flame Learning channel. One video in particular is showing off the new features of Flame 2024, which was produced by none other than our very own Jeff Kyle. 3 sets of videos have been released so far. One about modifying the start frame and batch, metadata overlay options, batch paint improvements, and much, much more. All these fantastic videos are available at the Flame Learning channel. Oh, didn't need to pass that one. So thank you, Jeff, for all the stuff that you do from the Flame Learning channel. And that's going to do it for the slides. Okay, I'm back. I'm not going to waste any time to introduce these 2 that we have here. It was the only 2 guys that I could find on Craigslist to talk about Flame, so thank you so much, guys. We've got Fred and we've got Stephane. How are you guys doing today?
Well, very good. I mean, being on Craigslist is a great place to talk about Flame, so thanks for finding
Thanks
us
for replying.
yeah, well, we're that kind of people.
I appreciate that. Awesome. And then we got stuff to showcase from both of you. So first we're going to start with Stephane, and then after you're done doing your slides, we're going to head over to Fred and we're going to show some on-screen content. So let's start over with you, Stephane.
Very good, very good. So let's start the slideshow. As you said, in fact, we released Flame Family 2024 last month. In fact, on April 7th. So just before, a week before NAB, so that way you were able to see the software before we go to the trade show and we talk about it. So let's talk about some of the technologies before Fred shows you some of the magic in application. Let's talk about one of the big feature for the macOS user is the native support for Apple Silicon, which is a great capabilities that we're having. So we are a better citizen on the platform, which is great for all of you who invested, in the Mac Studio and the MacBook Pro and all these technologies. So this is great. There were many conversation or question, in fact, on the Logic boards, in fact, about what does it mean, Apple Silicon. Don't be confused with Apple Metal, which is the graphic infrastructure, which we are working on, but this release is only the infrastructure for Apple Silicon. So you're going to see more technology be coming, in fact, in our products in the relatively near future, which will give you, more power from the workstation. So Apple Silicon is first, but then we have other thing in the work to give you, more power on the macOS platform. On the Linux side, I'm sorry. So as I entertained you last December, we moved away from CentOS. So the 2024 release requires you to think about your transition to Rocky Linux, which is a great operating system, a more modern, like a mixture of macOS and Windows with all the security and the power. So if you haven't done so, I would invite you seriously to think about your transition to Rocky Linux. The minimum requirement is 8.5. The latest one we use support, in fact, is 8.7. We have an upgrade script, which is a very easy script to upgrade your 8.5 to 8.7. There's no upgrade script between CentOS and Rocky because this is a major operating system upgrade. So you'll see, you'll like it. Most of the users who've done, in fact, the transition last year when we introduced 2023 release with Rocky Linux, were quite happy to be able to work on this operating system. With this release, there's a new DKU, the driver in the kernel utility version 18, which contained the latest NVIDIA driver. And again, there were many conversations about NVIDIA driver for our products. So you'll be more than pleased to note that since we are using this latest driver, well, the ones of you who are using other application or services on your workstation will be able to use these. Think about 3D renderer and all these things, right? So that's some people on Logic, in fact, discussed about in some threads. If you use ShotGrid was not supported on Rocky 8. And that has been done, in fact, in the last month. So you're going to be able to have your production environment on Rocky Linux without any issue. Let me look at the Slack, at the chat. Good, I don't see. Yes, you can run in parallel multiple versions of the application. There's no problem at all on the various operating systems like macOS and Linux. So there's no problem. Of course, 2024 is only supported on 8.5 and 8.7 CentOS, like I said earlier. On the cloud side, some of you venture to the cloud, so we also have the minimum, the Amazon machine image, which is your operating system and driver, which is also on Rocky 8.7 plus DKU 18, and we also we added support for cloud digital interface on the Amazon G5 instances, which are the NVIDIA graphic instance we use on the cloud. So give it a try. I mean, you'll see that it's quite impressive to be able to run Flame Family products on the cloud on a remote environment. That's quite interesting workflows. On the preview hardware and drivers, so we updated to the latest 16.2, the 3AGA driver, which is also compatible with our previous generation of products, so 2023.3. So that means that when you move to 2024 and you want to learn 24 before putting it in production, well, you still can use, in fact, the latest driver and use your in production application. We also had support for the IO X3 card, which is it's a nice IO and preview card from our friends at AGA. And for the ones of you who are using Blackmagic Design preview hardware, so we also added support for their latest driver, the 12.4.2 on macOS, which is also compatible with our previous update for the 2023 release stream. And we've added support for the Ultra Studio 4K. There were many conversations about this card on Logik. So this is something you are able to use for your HD to 4K broadcast display needs. Media format, and this is something that I always explain. So production people are quite fast to upgrade the camera firmware, since they can get feature in their camera, because these days cameras are computers, right? So we've updated 2024 with the latest technology from ARRI, from Blackmagic Raw, from Red and Sony. So make sure that you move to 2024, because some of these formats are not compatible, in fact, with the previous release. So you need this version to be able to decode these formats from this camera. And last but not least, Dolby Vision. So many of you adopted our Dolby Vision workflow. So this release introduced the content mapping version 4 XML export. We also added content mapping 4 to 2.9 real-time preview using the internal content mapping unit software. And since Apple Silicon is a new deliverable, so we had to go through a qualification with our friends at Dolby. So that means that the 2024 release on Linux and macOS, well, has been qualified by Dolby, meaning that the math, the color science we are using, so everything is on par with the expectation from Dolby Laboratories. So have a look at that. So these are some of the infrastructure features part of 2024 release. And I guess now it's time to give the floor to Fred for more in application, unless there are questions, right? I don't know if there are questions on the chat. I think it was, I don't see any questions. Anyways, if at the end you have any question, you can get back to us and we'll go through.
I think that the one I only saw was, can you keep previous versions up and running? That was the only one that I saw so far.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Good.
Nice. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Okay. Well, so now we're going to hand it on over to Fred.
Yeah, so hello everyone. A lot of the stuff that I want to show you are actually things that have been highlighted already in Jeff's videos on Flame Learning channel. So I'm going to go through them, but what I'm going to try to do is try to maybe explain a little bit what was the objective that we had in mind and why we implemented those features. So, and if you have like questions at any time, and you can post them in the chat. I'm going to try to answer them the best that I can. So we're going to start with the start frame. So if you remember what we did in 2023.2, we worked on the multi-channel support. And one of the things that we wanted to bring there was the ability to keep the channel's name. So I would say that we're making like baby steps on being able to keep as many metadata as possible in Flame and being to export back as many metadata as possible. So what we did in 2024, which was like across the entire software, was to be able to keep the file index and change the start frame of your shots throughout. So if we start in the media hub here, you're going to see that I have this multi-channel coming from CG that starts at frame 99. So before, when you would import that, you would get that clip at frame 1, which was problematic if you wanted to go back and forth with the artist working with you on the project. So in 2024, you're gonna see that if I look at that clip here in my player, it's gonna say that it starts at 91 instead of 1. And if you look at its timeline, it's gonna be the same. So this is really one of the things. So it's both for the metadata being preserved, I as explained, but it's also another thing that we're starting to work on that you should be some baby steps throughout multiple releases. It's and we're going to talk about the metadata overlay that is part of that as well. And that is making sure that you can actually review your work and use Flame as the hub in your facility for your project, and to make sure that you can properly communicate with everybody in the ecosystem of the project. So this is why we have implemented that feature. So I'm just going to quickly go through the different elements of the software that we had to modify to actually make that work everything. So we have seen in the player, of course, there are some preferences, and there's one thing that is really important here to highlight, and it's the difference between the use in create batch group and the new batch group. Okay, so for the start frame, you can define a value. Normally, a standard value would be 1001, but just for the sake of showing you here the difference between the two, I will keep it at 1. And create batch group for us is everything that uses the create batch group function. So it could be in a timeline, sorry about that. So it could be in a timeline here, okay, with the create batch group, but it can also be in publish. And if you use the preference disabled, you're gonna use the start frame of your media. If you actually enable the button, it's gonna use your setup. Usually we would think that you would keep that preference off by default, so you keep the media value. What's important is the new batch group with the use first clip value here. And by new batch group, we mean when you actually manually create a new batch group in your media panel, or when you use the Python API to do so. And in that case, you have the choice between using the first clip you drop in, use its start frame. So in that case, if I drop this one, you can see that I have a start frame of 1. I'm going to do this. It's going to switch to 1001 with the duration automatically set as well. If you wanted a value to always be kept by default, so the one in your preferences, you would actually use the use start frame value. We also made some changes to that button because we had feedback from people saying that it was way too easy to actually mess up the value that you had set. So since it is just above the current frame, some people would want it to like scroll in there and just by accident change the start frame. So we made it a non-editable button, and but you can still change the value, right? So you have different options here in the pull down button that is associated to it. So if you want to use a custom value, you're gonna use the calculator with the change start frame, and you have the two different values that you can set by default. So you can use the value you have set in your preferences, or the value of the first clip that you dropped in your batch clip. I'm gonna go quickly over different areas that are affected by this change. So obviously, when you think about changing the start frame, you can think about the tools tab in utilities. We already have the change time code, so we added change frame there. One thing that I wanted to highlight is that if you have connected segments, you have the choice to actually update all of the connected segments or not. with an option there. The option is also available in the reformat window. So here you're gonna select frame and select change frame here, and you can change it from the timeline as well. So which is probably the most useful case here, because you're gonna import them. You can select multiple segments, so all of them, if you wanted them to all start at 8001, for example, you would go a change start frame here, and you would set the value, and it will update all the different segments in your timeline. If we actually open it a little bit so you can see the information, two things that I wanted to point out. So obviously you're gonna have the option here for showing the frame count for your sequence. So if you want to have a look at the source, you're gonna have a look here at that black button showing you the source timecode and the source frame. So now both of them at once, which is new. And if you work in a timecode display, so I'm going to do a Control-Alt-T here to actually switch my display. You see now that we always show you the source information as well as we're showing you the record and source timecode. And one thing that I wanted to particularly explain also, I know that Jeff went over it in his video, but it's something that can be a little bit, I wouldn't say complicated, but it's a very special case that probably most of you will have to deal with, okay, is the time warp. So in this case here, I have a clip that start at 8001, and obviously if I were to go through it, it would just be a sequential frame like this. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. If I put a time warp at 50%, for example, then I have two main choice on how to deal with the frame display for that. So if you go to that menu here on rendering and interpolation, you now have a new option, which is start frame, that will let you decide if you want the start frame information to be the one that is before the time warp. So that would be really the segment before the effect is applied. So in that case, since I'm on pre-time warp, this is why I still have the same sequence, okay, over here. If I select post-time warp, this will actually give me a one-to-one relationship between the image displayed on the player and the information. So since I have a 50% time warp, you're gonna see that here I'm gonna go 1001, then next frame 1001, and then 2, 2, and then 3, 3, and so on, since it's a 50% speed change. And finally, the last option is if you are not happy with either of those values, you can always select custom and change the time warp itself. So this is relevant. Another very good example that I could have give is the reverse button. So if I hit reverse and I'm on pre, even if the image was kind of, I wouldn't say flip, but it was reversed, I will keep the first frame at 8001, but if I use post, then the first frame will be associated with the image itself, and it's going to be 8028 at the start. And one last mention for the start frame is that you have functions in the Python API to actually change those. So you can have a look at the what's new document. You're gonna see the documentation there about the Python API. So you can easily fetch the information, but also set it to the value that you want when you import clip, for example. So that's it for the start frame section. So quickly, I don't see any questions that need to be asked. So we're gonna move on to the metadata overlay. So as I mentioned, the objective of adding that feature was really to start building some momentum on making Flame the perfect hub for your project and for lead artists to be able to review easily the work that they could have done. So when we're talking about lead artists, it could be one person working on a project alone, and he's the lead artist of that project and he probably needs to review his work, but you can also be part of an ecosystem and like aggregate the work of multiple people that you need to review. So for that, before, we had a lot of people who were using the burn-in metadata timeline effects directly in a timeline. Okay, so I just created just a two-layer burn-in here so we can actually see something. And it was working properly, but there was different issues with it. First of all, it could be a little bit tedious to always create a layer for each of the clip, and then maybe on export you didn't want them, so you had to make sure that you wouldn't have your primary track set on the at the top on the gap where the burn-in metadata is. And when you were switching clips, it wouldn't be automatically present there. So if I had my sequence but wanted to go inspect my source clip, it would disappear. Same if you had multiple sequences open. So what we did to improve that part was to add the metadata overlay to all the players. So, and when we talk about players in Flame, we're talking about obviously the player in the timeline, the full screen player in the conform tab, but we're not talking about what we call viewports in areas such as batch and the FX tab. So if we look at the right side here, just below, oh, sorry, I swiped, you see that we have two new icons. Okay, the first one is not related to the metadata overlay, but is the overlays themselves. So you can now quickly enable and disable the overlays display like that. Before you would have to go, you would have to go here to actually enable them or use the Alt O shortcut. And by the way, the shortcut has been modified in 2024. So your shortcut to enable, disable the overlays is no longer Alt-O, is now F11. Okay, so we decided to move it to F11 because we have actually assigned the metadata overlay to F10. So the metadata overlay is the other icon here. So I can either enable it with the button or with the F10 shortcuts. By default, what you're gonna see for the metadata overlay is kind of a duplicate or emulation of what you have in the information box here. Okay, so it's basically the same metadata represented in the same way. So what we're doing is we're shipping with two different presets by default. So if you look at the drop down buttons for both, so for the overlays and the metadata overlay, you're gonna see here your different presets that are saved and a quick access to edit them. So the same is true for the metadata overlay here. By default, we're shipping with two different presets. So a frame preset and a time code preset. It's basically the same. Both replicate the information box, but with different metadata, obviously. So one being frame, the other being time code. And you can create your own and you can edit the setup. So we're gonna go to edit setup and you're gonna see that basically we're using the same tools that we're using for burn-in metadata for the metadata overlay. So I wanted to quickly go through a list, we took the opportunity because there was a lot of individual flame feedback requests on adding some new layers and being able to fetch some different information in burn-in metadata. So we took the opportunity to do them. They are available not only in the metadata overlay, but in burn-in metadata as well. So if we look here at our list, I'm just gonna quickly go through all of them, and let me maybe just reset all so we don't have that much noise. But in segment name, you can now print the version ID and the version name directly from the segment name layer. In segment index, you can actually burn the segment index from the timeline as part as your metadata overlay. We also made an addition to timeline effects in which you can decide to show only the time warp and show the time warp speed only. If both are disabled, you're gonna get all the timeline effects that are applied to a clip. The media cache, so if it's cached or not. One thing that you need to know is that this is not updated on the fly. So you really need to move the positioner and go from, like, for example, one segment to another before it is updated, because we are not updating the FX as we are actually caching. So if I was to start caching that clip, it would remain on cache. But if I would move the positioner, then we would get a hint and it would say caching unless until it is cached. We added the handles where you can actually display the head, the tail, or both on the same layer. On the frame layer, we added the possibility to display the current frame, the start frame, and the end frame, or a combination of the three. One thing that is really important here is that a lot of people were actually using source media with the name of the, let's say, your AXR file. So file location here, and would use include file name to go fetch the correct information for the file index. So this is no longer needed now that we're actually using the proper start frame. So if you go to frame and here you set source media, you see that I'm gonna get my 1001 directly from my clip here. And then we added a media status. Media status is kind of a special case because it's something that you're gonna use only, but my suggestion would be to use them on all your setups, but it probably won't appear that often. Basically, it will appear when you have unlinked media or you have a missing media, so a media error. So it shouldn't appear unless you display the overlay on a unlinked clip, and then it's going to actually display the information. And finally, batch and batch effects. So a mean to show the iteration, batch name, and batch iteration, just like you would do, for example, in a render or write file mode. Oh, I just forgot. There's one thing that I wanted to mention as well here. If I have audio segments on my sequence, before it was not possible to go fetch the information from these audio segments. So here, if I switch back to my frame setup and we go to edit setup, you can see here that I'm looking at clip 6, which is my video element. But if I select the segment name and here in my metadata track, I have defined my audio track as A1 left. I can then say, look at the audio, and you can see that I'm fetching the information from my audio segment. So you might want to have some setups that have both the video and audio segment segment name of the frame that you're looking at right now. One last mention for the metadata overlay is that you can actually have a different level of setups. So Autodesk is the two ones we're shipping with. Custom will appear when you make a modification and that it's not the current setup that is there. So since I've changed it for audio segment, it's telling me that I'm using a custom setup. You can also create your own user setup that's going to be associated to your user profile, or you can create setups that are shared amongst all user profiles and all projects on your machine. So in that case, what I did here is that I took the setup that I had created here for my burn-in metadata, and I've just saved it in a shared location, so I can save my timeline setup, and then when I switch clip, it will always be displayed like that. I think I keep forgetting. I see a comment about not seeing the drop down. I forgot. It's my mistake. When we're sharing our screen with the software that you're using for Logik Live, I've elected to share a window, and I think that the drop down are not part of that window, so they do not appear. I'm really sorry about that. I'll try to remember to share the entire screen the next time, but it shouldn't be an issue. It might be, but there's not much that I can do about it. I'm really sorry about that.
No
But
problem. Thank you though. Yeah, you were on a roll. I didn't want to stop you. But we can use our imaginations.
Okay. So the next one, which is a little bit unfortunate, but at least now that I know that they do not appear, I will I will try to give you a better idea of what's happening. So the next one is, I think is the one video that Jeff has produced that is not yet on the Flame Learning channel, but it's one thing. It's being able to paste metadata from a clip node to different nodes. Obviously, historically, I would say that there was a lot of things in Flame that were kind of hidden, and it's always something that we're trying to improve to make them a little bit more obvious and to add ways to perform those operations from the user interface, so you can actually see them and say, hey, what is that? What's happening there? Like, I'm curious about that thing I'm seeing. So we're talking about T-click here. So I don't know if there's somebody who is not familiar with T-click, but basically the idea, and I don't have the proper write file node here because I already made a modification. So let me just bring that one. So if I bring a write file node here, you're gonna see that I have a time code to 0, the shop name is empty. I could have like a different file type. And when I select that node and I T-click on that clip, then everything's gonna be propagated properly. So all the information is gonna be propagated all at once. So there was two issues that we wanted to fix with this. So the first one is that T-click, you really need to know about it, and it's almost impossible to kind of discover it or learn about it unless somebody like is demonstrating it to you somewhere. And the fact that it was a all-in-one, so you cannot copy individual information. It was always all the information from one clip, sorry. So what we did, and this is where you're going to have to use your imagination. So if I open the context menu for a clip, you have the options to copy that clip. So you could, for example, paste it anywhere in another batch or in your media panel. But now when you select a node, under the paste entry, you're gonna see a paste special entry where you actually have all the individual metadata that can be pasted. So if I wanted to paste only, for example, the shot name for my clip, okay, I could see here that I don't have a shot name. This is 0, but I could say paste special shot name only, and you see that this has remained to 0 and this has been changed to shot 30. The same is true if you wanted to paste actually multiple informations at once. Okay, so the problem that I mentioned where it was kind of a all or nothing. So if I do a paste special, I will now have an option to call a custom window in which I will be able to select the information that I want. In that case, I could select source and record time code, and you see that both have updated there. For nodes like 2D transform, we will only present you the metadata that can be pasted. So in that case, I could only paste the metadata for the canvas resolution. So the only option that's going to be available to me will be 2D transform. Will be sorry, resolution. And the one thing that is really important and really cool about the feature is that before you were limited with the clip to a clip that was in your schematic, right? Because you had to select a node and then perform the operation. But since this is based on the copy operation of a clip, it means that you can actually do it from your timeline. So copy a segment on your timeline, copy a clip in your media panel, and then go back to batch and actually paste the metadata information in your render, write node, or any other node that accepts metadata. The biggest improvements that we've made to a tool is in Paint. Why Paint? So I'm gonna probably sound like a broken record because I've been saying that for quite a while now. But since we have a lot of the team members dedicated to re-architecturing some core parts of Flame, we have less resources to put on tools. We're trying to identify the tools that are used by the most user in the community. So for this time around, we selected Paint because we had some requests on Flame feedback that had a lot of votes, and because the analytics that we're running on the Flame usage was showing that Paint was always in the top 3 of the most used node that we had. So obviously, like by far the most used one shouldn't be a surprise. It's Action, and after that, it's always like depending on the reports that we're getting, shuffling a little bit. But Paint is always making it in the top 3 basically. So I'm gonna go through some of the changes. So when we're looking at improving something like that, we are usually looking at different sort of things that we want to do. So usually it's a cleanup. So there are some things that we think didn't age very well and we want to rearrange them a little bit. We're looking at feedback from customers. We're looking at defects, and we're trying to fix as many as possible. So there are some things, smaller things that you might not even like see from the get-go, but as you use it, you're gonna like realize that there are some quirks that are no longer there. And obviously there are some bigger improvements that you will notice right away. So UI wise, On the left, if we start with the list here, we wanted to clean um, some of the functions that we had there, and one of the better example was with the hide function that was both in the source here, but there was always also a solo and a hide there, and all three of them wouldn't communicate with each other, so you would end up in like situation where you wouldn't know why you're not seeing the selected strokes or things like that. So that's a good example of a cleanup that we've done. We also, like, one of the most requested or the most feedback that we had on Paint was with consolidate. So there was two issue. A lot of people wanted to be off by default, but also wanted to be persisted. So when you would launch Flame again, it wouldn't turn itself back on. So we fixed both of those by adding a preference in the tools. And I'm realizing that I don't even have, okay, no, sorry, there was a little delay there. So if you look at the tools and timeline effects here on the paint section, you can say if you want consolidate on or off, and it's going to be persisted per brush sets. So you could say on my brush 1 I want it on, and on my brush 2 I want it off, and then when you switch between brush set, you see that it follows the your preference. Speaking of brush sets, UI wise, this is one of the things that we've done. They were already there, but a lot of people didn't know about them because they were on the right top right corner here. And we decided to move them so they are a little bit more like in desktop paint. So you have buttons now. The shortcuts are still working, so you can go through them with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, for example, and you can set a default state for your presets. Okay, so you can actually come here and sorry, no press, and say this is the brush sets that I want to use by default. So when you're gonna create a new paint node, you're gonna get the same brush sets every time. I'm gonna try to go as fast as possible, as I see that I don't have that much time left. So UI wise, we shuffled some buttons around. One of the main reason was that we wanted things like the range and the animation to be closer to the list, because one of the things that like most people forget is always to set the range to sequence, and then you had to go through the entire UI to change that. So we wanted to associate some buttons like this, and also we wanted to have the room for a new thing that is the axis menu. So to demonstrate that, I'm going to show you basically one simple example, okay, of a shot here when I just want to extend like the little forest here in that the hole that was created there. So what I'm going to do is that on purpose, I'm going to leave that on frame. I'm going to go to reveal, and maybe with a stronger brush like this. So the first feature I want to talk to you about is the add still button, which is the equivalent of the save buffer in desktop paint. So in desktop paint, you could actually save an image in the memory buffer, so you could use it to reveal something later on, at a different frame. This is not something that could be done in batch, because once you would quit the software, the memory buffer is flushed. So we added a way to actually create explicit media for that. So if I press on add still, it's gonna create a new source, and if you look at your schematic, you're gonna have that new source that you can use to reveal. So I'm gonna go in reveal here, and I'm just quickly gonna go and do 3 different strokes or something like that, so that won't be like super clean, but it's gonna give you a quick idea of what can be done. So let's say that this is exactly what I wanted to do. So I think the most requested thing that we had for batch paint, and it's probably I think it was a kind of a top 5 or top 10 in the flame feedback, is the ability to select multiple strokes and actually modify them all at once. So in that case here, I only painted on the first frame, and I can switch that to sequence so it goes throughout. The same is true for all the different controls here. So if I'm not sure how much that's going to be visible. That's going to be a little bit ugly, but so if I change the size, you see that I'm changing the size of all 3 strokes. And one of the small thing that I was talking about that was not there before is that now we are actually changing the stroke as you scroll in the field. So before, you would actually only see the result on the pen up. The other thing that was requested quite a lot was to be able to track the strokes. So this is what I was talking about with the axis menu here. So if you look at the axis, you see that you have an access to a 1-point tracker. You can decide which layer you want to use as the source of your tracking in the tracking. And you have 2 options, so absolute and relative. What is really important here to understand is that since I have 3 strokes, you can see that I have 3 different edit box, right? With a center point for each edit box, like this. If you track in absolute, the 3 points will actually go to your tracking point. So they're gonna end up one on top of the other. But with the relative mode, we're gonna go in our tracker, select any point. Okay, it could be like the top of the guy head, it can be like anything close to it. We're gonna analyze that, and that's gonna create a offset. And what we're gonna do is actually apply that offset individually to the 3 strokes. So you can see here that if oh, sorry, that's my mistake, because I didn't have all 3 actually selected when I entered, because I wanted to show you the edit box. So with all 3 selected, you're gonna see that all 3 will be offsetted just like we did in the tracker. One thing that is important, I think, to understand, that I think I didn't communicate to Jeff, so he couldn't explain it in the video that he did. But if you want to actually modify your strokes after, what we did is we applied the offset to the position of the strokes. Okay, so that's all good, and you have some offset field to actually offset them. But we also apply the transformation to the source image. Okay, so if you're trying to modify it, and then you end up saying like there's something that is not working, it could be that the information that we applied to the source is not modified correctly. And by that, what I mean, I'm going to show you an example. So you can see that those 3 are actually animated, right? So this is something that is new, by the way. Before, you couldn't animate the offset. So I'm going to actually apply a keep current frame only to all the strokes. So give me you're not seeing it, but so you're gonna see here that when I scroll, the image offset is not applied. So you're gonna actually offset the strokes, but not the media inside it. So if you have some tweakings that you need to do, this is one thing that you could look at. And maybe one last thing very quickly. I know that we're running a little late, but there are some things that were before in Paint, but only accessible as channels from the animation channel. So the position, the scaling, and the rotation were some of them, and we have put them in the UI, so they are obviously much more easier to use. But it's also true for the start and end animation channel. So if I go to Paint and I just gonna paint a simple brush, okay, like this, okay, I'm gonna go to edit, I'm gonna turn that to sequence. So through the sequence it won't change, but the start and end field, for those of you who don't know, can be used to replicate a little bit what you would do with auto paint in desktop paint. So the start is the start of the stroke, and the end obviously is the end of the stroke, and the 0 is what it is at the beginning, and the end is what it is at the end. So if I go to the start of my stroke and I say I want the start to be at 0, but also the end being at 0, then I won't see anything. And if I go to the end of my clip here and I say I want the end to be the end of my stroke, then you're gonna create this auto paint animation. So this is also something that is now available in the user interface. And that's it, Amanda.
Nice. No, that's really good. So thank you, both of you, for coming on here. I really appreciate it. It was really cool seeing you guys at NAB too, because I was able to see a little bit of a demo that you did as well. But this is more in depth, so this was really cool to see this as well. So, all right. So, hang out, guys. We're gonna meet everybody at the chat.
Yes.
And
yeah.
So, thank you for that. All right, we'll see you guys shortly.
Thank you.
All right, cool. So now it's another favorite time where it's prize time. So hang in there for some prizes. Okay, everybody signed up, right? Good. So what we got here, I should have said it before. I was going to say it's a notebook. We got merch. Lots and lots of merch. Okay, so we got a notebook. Notebook is going to Harvey. Harvey, go ahead and say in the chat if you're here. That'd be great. Next thing we have is we have a phone case. Going to the next lucky winner. Prizes. That's right. Mark Wellington. Yay. I know you're here. We saw you chatting it up. So congrats to both of you. So now to conclude our show, let's go on to some slides. So coming up next on the next Logik Live, we have, what do we have? So we have an interview with co-founder of Looper.io, Alex Williams, that'll be hosted by Jeff Kyle. And then on Sunday, May 21st, What's New in Silhouette Mocha Pro 2023 with Ben and Margot Borsfex. That'll be hosted by Jeff Kyle as well. If you haven't signed up for the forum, head on over and do so at forum.logik.tv. And while you're there, click on the link to sign up for Discord. It is a wonderful place to be, forum.logik.tv. This episode of Logik Live is going to join all of its other friends online later today. And if you haven't checked out the podcast, go listen to them. They're awesome. We're going to have a whole bunch more podcasts coming out soon. If you haven't already, you can check out number 39 with John Agapitos, another wonderful flame artist and all-around human being. Thank you again for joining our Logik Lives. Oh, yeah, you join us around like 4 a.m. That's amazing. That's awesome. So you can find these on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, anywhere podcasts are available. And check this out. Randy loves this part. Look at all those subscribers. So amazing. If you haven't already subscribed to the YouTube channel, please do. Tell your friends. Tell your friends. Tell everybody. Thank you again to all our patrons on Patreon. And don't forget to check out the merch store. As you should. Get some amazing stuff for your flame friends. And a big thank you to Boris FX for sponsoring Logik Live. If you'd like to save 50% on everything they make, you can use the new Logik code. You can use the new code Logik-2023 discount code at checkout. Thank you to AJA for sponsoring Logic Live. And I'd also like to thank our friends at Hot Spring. Thank you for your support. So thanks again to Fred and Stephane. Again, congrats to the 2023 Flame Award winner, Soham. Congrats to you. That'll do it for today. Thank you so much, everybody. Thanks for coming out. Thanks, everyone in the community. This was great. Have a good weekend, and we will see you all next time.